Welcome back to One More Mana. My name is Derik, and today we are getting back into some Midnight Hunt goodness. Now, obviously there's a long list of commanders that I love in this set, but there is one that really did speak to me from a lore perspective, a character I love, and that I was so excited to get a very flavorful card, and that is Ludevic Necrogenius. Now, if you want any of the just beautiful Innistrad goodness in this deck, or maybe you're just trying to go ahead and just pick up some new singles from Midnight Hunt, head on over to TCG Player. You can find all the showcase frames, full art, any type of art you're looking for, foils, all that beautiful stuff. And obviously, speaking of beautiful, get those lands. Those basics are so just perfect. You can find them at TCG Player, and if you use the affiliate link down in the description below to help support the channel in the process, we really do appreciate all the help. But let's just jump straight into Ludevic. Ludevic is awesome. Ludevic is just a cool character, this Necrogenius as the card says, and I was really happy we got this version. The previous one that was an Is It one, the old partner commander, wasn't the most flavorful. I did love that you could partner with Crom, that felt nice, but the card itself just didn't feel like what I thought Ludevic should be, and they've nailed it with this one. So Ludevic is a blue and a black for 2/3 human wizard. On ETB and attack, you can go ahead and mill a card, and then it has this really strange activated ability where you can pay 2 blue, 2 black, and then X to go ahead and exile X creatures from your graveyard. When it flips into Olag, which, quick aside, I've mentioned this in a previous video, Olag looks so damn cool. It is literally, whenever we get Bloodborne 2, and at this point it's going to be like 2050 when we finally get Bloodborne 2, Olag needs to be some sort of character in there because it just fits just perfect. I don't know what this mode, but yeah, it's perfect. So it's amazing. When you flip it, you stop, you stare at the beauty, you enjoy it, and then you read this long ass text box in there. And basically with Olag, when it flips, it's going to become a copy of one of those cards that one of those creatures you exiled, and then with a number of +1 counters equal to the number of creatures you've exiled. It really does remind me of some weird combination of the Scarab God, because it's becoming a copy as a 4/4, but also the Mimeoplasm, because we're exiling multiple creatures and throwing +1 counters. And I think the deck build that I want to go is much more similar to how I would build like a Reanimator control Scarab God as opposed to Mimeoplasm. It just feels like it's really inefficient to really go all in and try to spend a whole bunch of mana and exile a whole bunch of creatures to make this one giant monstrosity. There's so many slots in this deck we're going to want for other things. This is a really hard deck for me to go ahead and build as a 35-40 creature deck where we're just exiling creatures left and right and filling our graveyard with creatures. What I feel like I want to do with this deck is make it just kind of like a Dimir group mill deck, and use this as just one of the awesome payoffs. Not the only one, but one of many. So for example, if we're milling everybody, we can cheat stuff out of other people's graveyards in addition to cheating stuff out of ours, and then have a handful of just giant terrifying targets that we can kind of consistently get to with our commander each game to serve as those late game threats. Overall, it's going to be a super fun deck. If y'all had fun with my Scarab God build, this is going to be kind of along those same lines, except with a few more explosive ways to get there using our commander, as opposed to the kind of the attrition based way that a Scarab God deck might win. All right, so we're going to start with the creatures, and the creatures are probably the most interesting category in the sense that it's doing a lot of weird things that we're trying to do with this deck. We're going to have a lot of enablers, so things like Stitcher Suppliers and, you know, Deranged Assistance, Violent Tumor, these different things that kind of just give us the opportunity to get things into our graveyard to get our engine going. But the biggest decision point in this deck using this type of build is going to be what big scary targets you choose to get. I chose to go sort of mean with some of these targets, so these are definitely going to be based on playgroup, but I think something like a Void Winnower, something like, you know, Jin-Gitaxias, which kind of can be a boogeyman, even something like Phage, but because of the way this card interacts and flips, it doesn't enter for Phage, so you can get around that losing the game thing. So it's really one of the few ways I think to really just cheat Phage in. It's super cool. Now, if you start playing and you realize, okay, this deck isn't strong enough to put a threat out like this and I'm getting killed immediately after, maybe we'll have to make some adjustments and something I might have to play by ear with it to figure it out. But I do want to start with some of these mean cards just because the deck isn't super broken to begin with, so having some just powerhouse things to kind of get you there might be necessary. But some of the stuff that I do think throughout the various iterations will remain is stuff that's going to enable your plan or kind of do cool things with your opponent's stuff. So Fleet Swallower is great because if we want to go ahead, whether we cast it, cheat it out, milling our opponent's libraries like that enables everything else the deck is trying to do. Rexiel does a great job of stealing your opponent's instants and sorceries, casting those, as we fill everything else, getting all this crazy stuff going. And then Rakshasa Debaser, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that, I apologize. Rakshasa Debaser is amazing too, because now we're stealing creatures out of opponents' graveyards, and it's really cool because I feel like a lot of the Reanimator decks I use really focus on ETBs, and because our Olag thingy is not going to enter because it's just becoming a copy of it, we have to get more creative and look at attack triggers or combat damage triggers and things like that. So I do like that it's working in a different axis than your standard Mimeoplasm or Scarab God in that sense. And then the artifacts, this artifact category looks incredibly similar to my most recent Scarab God build in that it's almost identical because we're doing the same thing. We want to ramp a lot. This is a big activated ability we have on our commander. Might be a late game mana sink. Maybe if we want to just get something a little bit bigger. This is a deck that can be mana intensive and mana hungry at times, so it is nice to have as much ramp as we can, so a good amount of it's here. Then we have the mill stables, things like Mesmeric Orb and Mind Crank to get those graveyards full. It's definitely a risky deck to play, and I found this a lot with Scarab God. Because there's so many graveyard-based decks in the format right now, you're kind of just enabling people's game plans as much as your own half the time. The nice thing about a Scarab God, or the nice thing about maybe something like a Mimeo if you're going for a group mill, is you can exile their stuff at instant speed and your commander works as graveyard hate in addition. We don't really have that luxury in this, so it's gonna be playing we're gonna be playing a very dangerous game here, and we need to hope that we have the means to take advantage of it more so than our opponents do. Kind of along those same lines of enabling those opponents, Sword of Body and Mind is wonderful in here. It's been one of my favorite mill cards, and I like to play a lot of mill. It's been one of my favorites because it does work as a way to equip, especially in this where we're making our commander a threat sometimes, suit it up, give it some protection, and still get the engine going, and it lets us be a little bit more aggressive in the way we're trying to mill people. With the enchantments, it's really not a ton going on here. Search for Escante is phenomenal in a lot of decks, not breaking news, but because we are kind of instant and sorcery heavy, it's not only going to work as that mill enabler, but it's also going to let us dig for very specific cards, because this is the type of deck where at different stages in the game, when we get into the instants and sorceries, you'll see what I mean, we are looking for very specific targets, and this is a great way to early game get your engine going, late game find the targets. Fraying Sanity is just a staple in these types of decks. It is so good. I love the fact that you can choose yourself or your opponents, because maybe you're in a type of game where you want to get that Jingataxis. You want to be mean. You're feeling a little salty. You want to get that Void Winter out. Whatever it is, you can go ahead and put Fraying Sanity on yourself, start milling yourself to get it going. Or if you get one of these weird little combos or things going and someone's library is getting low, you can put it on them and work it as a finisher. Finisher enabler, it does a ton for us, and it's just a really fun card. Now, tracking it is a pain in the ass. Not fun. Realize that's not great. But outside of that, and there are a lot of mill cards that can get obnoxious with that, the utility of it just makes up for how hard it can be to keep track of sometimes. With the instance, we have a lot of interaction. You know me and my love of way overpriced counter spells, so Sublime Epiphany, Mystic Confluence. I want to have some level of counter magic in here, but I do want to have it double as other means, so I'm just not holding up counter spells. This isn't really a type of deck where we're trying to control the whole board in that sense, so we want the versatility there. I love some new cards. So Siphon Insight is super cool because it's kind of fitting our whole theme. We want to go ahead and take our opponent's stuff while we're milling everything. It does a really good job of that. And then Drown in Dreams is super interesting too. It does double as card draw. What I love about this card is because this is a group mill deck, mill isn't our primary win con, but there are going to be games, because this deck doesn't try to win super fast, that look, people's libraries are going to be getting low, and having the dual utility of, okay, I want to fill my graveyard early, want to draw cards, or I want to just finish someone off, mill them out, is great, and I see myself putting this in a ton of decks going forward. Memory Plunder might be my favorite instant in here though, period. It is so good. I love this card in my Scarab God deck. Because we're milling everyone's libraries, it's Commander. People are playing broken shit in these decks. This is a great way for 4 mana, because we're in Dimir, we're not really worried about the color restriction there. You're going to be able to steal whatever their best instant or sorcery is in their library most of the time because of the amount of mill we'll have going. So this is a crazy card. The fact that we can do it at instant speed, it is beautiful, and this is it's the most fun. People typically will not see this coming when you steal whatever crazy extra turn spell or something that they have hidden away in their library of goodness. And then for the sorceries, this is probably my favorite category just because you get so many of the cool explosive effects. So you have explosive mill with like Traumatize and Maddening Cacophony. Once you mill half of somebody's library or multiple players' libraries like that, you're gonna have so many targets for some of these other cool effects that you're just gonna really be able to take over games at times. So stuff like Ghoul's Night Out, where you're just taking the best card or best creature out of multiple people's libraries. You're basically Diluvian Primordialing. except for less mana on a sorcery is crazy. This is a crazy broken card. It seems like it's gonna be a ton of fun. And Mnemonic Betrayal does similar things, where Mnemonic Betrayal is basically a version of Yawgmoth's Will except for your opponents. And when you're milling all of their cards and your opponents are playing crazy broken stuff, you get so many options that you play this late game, you can really just take over with a card like this. And then with the lands, it's a 2-color mana base. You can see mine. I basically used a very similar mana base to my Scarab God deck because of how I built it, but you can do as many basics as you want. There's really not the need to get too fancy with it. Even with stuff like Cabal Coffers and some of those mana producing lands, the artifact based ramp is going to be enough. While it's mana intensive and we do want a lot of mana, this isn't the type of deck where you want like 50 mana. It's not necessary, so you don't have to worry too much about those. Mostly basics. The lands that I do think you should probably focus on, one would be Hive of the Eye Tyrant and stuff like Bojuka Bog, because you need graveyard hate. I didn't go super graveyard hate heavy in the deck, and you may be saying, why would you want to just exile everything you just worked so hard to build up in these people's graveyards? I will again emphasize, so many graveyard decks. I noticed even myself, I think 80% of my decks involve graveyard shenanigans, and I didn't even consider myself much of a graveyard player. So it's everywhere, so you need that hate. Hive the Eye Tyrant does just such a good job of just being on a land and letting you use targeted removal to be like, okay, I'm gonna steal this, I want this, I don't want them to have that. So you can choose, not the most mana efficient, but it's a cool effect. And obviously Bojuka Bog, it doesn't even need to be said, but specifically in this deck, a little bit extra. If you're playing against a Marin or something crazy, you need to have that Bojuka Bog held and ready, so when you go ahead and Maddening Cacophony everyone, you make sure that that player doesn't benefit more than you do. And obviously there's going to be stuff like Ipnu Rivulet and Nephalia Drownyard and stuff that gives you more options to just add to the mill engine. But to be honest, as long as you're running enough lands in this deck, definitely don't go too low. You want to be hitting your land drops here, and you'll be just fine. And that's going to do it for all the categories. Now let's get into the best part of every deck tech, and in this case, the Ludeviciest part. And that's the game-winning step. How are we about to win the game with this deck? And there's a lot of ways. There's a variety of fun ways to do it. And I think the first way I want to focus on is going to be using our commander to actually kill people. And there's a few different primary ways to do it. So you can use something like a Phage to go ahead and if you manage to hit someone. Now I didn't put a whole bunch of evasion. I'm sure you can do a build of this where you try to get Phage in the graveyard as fast as possible and build it around killing people with that. I didn't really feel like doing all that. Kind of just wanted to throw it in, see if I can get a win randomly with it. And if I do, thumbs up, it's exciting, and then I'll probably cut the card afterwards. But that is a possible way to win. I also obviously just love having a lot of these just big threat creatures in there, but I would say Phage best represents the make a copy, kill someone on the spot with it. Now the second most explosive way to win the game is going to be just that explosive, and it's going to be with these mill effects. So that's going to be some combination of Fraying Sanity and Maddening Cacophony, Fraying Sanity and Traumatize, or Fraying Sanity and basically any other mill card, Mesmeric Orb, all of these things. You can get silly, but specifically with Traumatize and Maddening Cacophony, that's just basically a one-shot. If they don't have a response before the end of the turn, they're going to be milled out, and if they don't have anything to do, they can't draw on their turn and they lose. So that is a really, really cool effect in these decks. I've run that in Scarab God for forever, and I promise it's really not as obnoxious as it sounds, just because it almost never works. I think in the years of playing the Scarab God at this point, I think I've maybe killed 3 or 4 people with it. Most times you either don't draw it, because I don't really run a lot of tutors, or someone actually ends up having a response for that one enchantment that you just play. So it's a fair way to kind of win explosively in a deck that tends to run slow. And then the third way to win the game is actually going to be Undefined. So much of this deck, similar to my Scarab God deck, is going to be milling everyone out, using their cards with some of your effects and trying to steal their cool stuff. So it's going to be some weird explosive thing. Maybe you get a Shieldred out and you bring back your Void Winnower and you're able to steal one of their big explosive instants and sorceries with Memory Plunder. It's going to be a cool adventure to kind of put these puzzle pieces together to figure out how to win. So it kind of keeps the deck fresh and that you really don't know what you're going for half the time. And now it is time, as y'all know, for our weekly trip to Phorexia. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was building this deck, I was like, I really don't know if I can work Infect in here. There's not really a direct way to do it, but we don't need directness. We don't need it to make sense. We need an Infect though. And that's with a couple cards that can be really fun in here. One is gonna be Skittles. I think Skittles is wonderful in here because all you need to do is get Skittles, make it a copy, and just exile the creature. Because when you exile a creature, you get a +1 counter. Getting Skittles to 5 is all you need for a 2-shot kill with some Infect. And if you just happen to have milled most of your deck, and you get a chance to mill a bunch of your creatures or exile a bunch of your creatures, get Skittles to a 10 somehow, That would be living the dream, just to go ahead and bring out that 10/10 Skittles and just say hi to someone and bring them back home to Phorexia. Now, if you go to a slightly higher creature count, Blighted Agent could be wonderful in here as well. Honestly, even with low creature count, Blighted Agent's a really cool target because you only need to exile 4 cards to get to a 5/5, and somebody's on a 2-turn clock. So I don't think you need as many creatures as it might seem to make this a threat. But these are both wonderful ways. Again, the deck's gonna probably run pretty slow. These are great ways to kind of give you options late game to finish players off. That's gonna do it for this week's deck tech. I really hope y'all enjoyed it. I really like Ludevic. If y'all couldn't tell, because I've built so many decks of kind of this style with Scarab God and Mimeo and all these, it's really fun. It's a toolbox, and one of the cool things you can do is switch out these big reanimation targets. If you have 6 or 7 of these, including the Phages and the Rexials and Void Winnow and all those, you can honestly just have a pile of different options, switch them in and out, and do different things every game. And then the reanimation targets and then the stealing of your opponents is always going to have that random effect. And this is really the type of deck that if you build it, can feel fresh for a very long time because it's genuinely trying to do different things. Especially in this case, because it's not as commander dependent. Scarab God and Mimeo are very much all built around your commander. This is using your commander as part of the engine, not the whole thing itself, and I think that could be really fun. And as always, a huge shout out to the patrons. We love and appreciate y'all so much. And something sort of exciting, we actually finally catching up with all these young people. We actually did get on TikTok, so check us out there. We have a whole bunch of shorts and stuff we're working on that are going to be coming out in the near future, getting those petty and bite-sized pieces, so definitely check that out. Plenty of Midnight Hunt still to come, and Crimson Vow is almost here. Just all the Innistrad goodness. But until then, I will see y'all next time.